This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News. News-free Dixie for the 21st century.
Good evening, boys and girls, scholars and laymen. This is your Brother Ron, also known as R2, C2, H2, the artivist, and we are prime time ready for another infotainment edition of The Artivist Thinks. I've been away for a minute. It's been a long time. I shouldn't left you without some dope commentary to listen to. Okay? So I'm bringing you the commentary after the holidays. I hope you survive the holidays, because some more holidays coming. 'Tis the season to be murderous, to be uncaring, to be indifferent. But y'all do realize that the best is yet to come. And this is Brother Ron, R2C2H2 the artivist. I'm excited, also saddened, also optimistic, also a little disturbed about what's going down in 2016. No icon, no iconoclast, no demagogue is safe from the final judgment. And we all know how things going on right now. We have lost a lot of iconic and iconoclastic figures this year. You know, starting out with Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Natalie Cole, you got Prince, you got Gordie Howe, Arnie Palmer, the king of golf, supposedly. And you got so many other people in between. So many people. Sharon Jones, the great, they call her the female version of James Brown. Soul Sister #1. Lost her. Gwen Ifill, a great black media icon, pioneer, journalist. I had a chance to meet her down in Selma. Took a picture with her. Had a choice between Gwen Ifill or Melissa Harris Perry, the tragic mulatto from MSNBC. I chose wisely. Gwen Ifill was definitely a legend. Had a chance to take a picture with her in front of Brown Chapel AME. Did not know she was a daughter of a preacher man, but we had a chance to take a picture in front of Brown Chapel AME down in Selma, Alabama, during the 50th anniversary weekend of Bloody Sunday. So I had a chance to meet her in front of that iconic building where Malcolm X actually spoke just days before his death in 1965, which also was the meeting place for planning this strategy. Dr. King and his people, SNCC, SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference. But, you would never know that Malcolm X spoke down there as a guest invited by SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. For all the statues and memorials and plaques, there is no mention of Malcolm X. And that's another story for another time and date. But we're here to talk about the one and only Fidel Castro, known around the world as Fidel, or the infidel, according to white supremacy racism. But whatever he is to you, he was somebody of importance. He was a very polarizing figure, and that means to me that he was a very effective, inspirational, motivational, hellraiser, indifferent, trailblazer, pioneer, revolutionary, social engineer, what do we call him? Iconoclastic, demagogue. Everybody had an opinion about Fidel Castro. Everybody had a certain look at Fidel. He was really a true icon in Black America. Just like the Kennedys. The Kennedy brothers are iconic figures in Black America. You go back to the 60s. People always talk about how you go to a black home in America, you had like a couple people on the wall. You had Jesus, Dr. King, and the Kennedy brothers, but Fidel was actually up there as well in the hearts and minds of Black America. Not everybody. We're not necessarily a monolithic people, but Fidel was very interesting. And I've been waiting in the back wings. I've been listening to what everybody has to say about Fidel Castro. I've been listening to online programs, people I respect. Shout out to the alt-black media, the alternative black media. I call it the alt-black media. It's like they call it the alt-right. We got the alt-black media out there doing their thing. I really enjoy the commentary and insight. But I say all this to say I want to offer another insight into the legacy of Fidel Castro, something I want to approach as well. I didn't personally know the man, but I knew and I could bear witness to his effect in terms of his influence on our people and on the world stage at large. But I want to add some things into the mix that may not have been considered over these last several days, as they are paying tribute to Fidel Castro in his native land of Cuba. Cuba, which the majority of the people are Afro-Cubanos or Afro-Latino heritage. Cuba is an island with a lot of melanin in it. But anyway, let's get all this together. I want to talk about Fidel Castro and some of the things people have talked to me about Fidel. I had a chance to get the opinions and commentary about this controversially great man from people like Baba Dick Gregory and to the brother, the Honorable Judge Joe Brown. People had a lot to say online about their commentary. I enjoy reading a lot of the feedback from the people on the videos of the interviews I put out there for the people, because We All Be is all about the people. We all be in it to win it. And some of them are very constructive, but you also got your usually negative, demeaning, mean-spirited commentators on there, but they don't stop. One monkey don't stop the show, and haters are really your biggest fans. So, I read a lot of the stuff that people say, but I don't really pay attention to it. I don't feel the need to respond because I'm doing too much work. And I'm glad to get the feedback from people who are really benefiting from the things that We All Be are doing. So if you feel like We All Be is doing a great job, please feel free or consider to support the movement by donating to the cause. We got a couple ways you can donate and support the cause, because the best is yet to come. But like Fidel, one thing that strikes me, people want to know, like, how did he survive so long in this system of white supremacy, racism, while being an effective person, hero, whatever you want to call it, for people liberation, for human liberation. Human, H-U-E, human liberation. How he's able to survive this long? Now people say, well, maybe he's an agent. Like, when people say about Baba Dick Gregory, why he's able to last so long? He's 84 years young, and a lot of his best friends like Medgar Evers and Malcolm X and Dr. King, they all met their end before they turned 40. Whereas Dick Gregory lived to be twice their age and then some change. Same thing with Fidel. Why Fidel lasts so long when people like Che Guevara been taken out? Che got taken out before he turned 40. At the age of 39, October the 9th, 1967. Some people say October 8th, 1967. Some people say he got killed on October 11th, 1967. But let's say October 9th, 1967, the Bolivian jungle. We're going to talk about that as well. Did Fidel Castro betray Che Guevara? That's something that's not really being talked about in the alt-black media, but it has been brought up in the so-called mainstream media, and in particular overseas media. They have brought up maybe Fidel betrayed the revolution, betrayed Che Guevara, and even maybe betrayed Hugo Chavez. Did he have something to do with the Kennedy assassination? That's another thing that is brought up that the black media, to my knowledge, have not really covered. But I'm going to put that out there because it needs to be talked about, because we got to understand the dynamics at play. People have been accusing so-and-so of being an agent, this and that. But let's understand what we all are. We all are agents. As long as we are upheld, paying taxes to, submit to, obey the orders, the rules, the authority, the regulations of white supremacy, racism, guess what, ladies and gentlemen, scholars and laymen, boys and girls, we are all agents of white supremacy, racism. Because we have not had the courage of our convictions or the understanding or any vision to overthrow this system of white supremacy, racism. So we are all agents. We are all a product of white supremacy, racism. Every human being on this planet is either a victim or a privileged recipient of white supremacy, racism. This is something we got to understand. We're not really understanding the dynamics at play. I see a lot of emotionalism when it comes to discuss these type of issues. People are calling other people coons. Like I said, you either got a conspiracy or you got a coonspiracy. But nobody can call anybody a coon. Simply for the fact that we all are in this system. We pay taxes to this system. We do religion in this system. We get our food food and water and clothing and shelter from this system. Whether it be smallpox blankets or Tuskegee experiments, we have yet to overthrow a system that demeans, that debilitates, that undermines humanity and humanity's full potential. Majority of the people on the planet are of melanin, of color. But yet you got a system. When people talk about, well, Castro was a communist, or this person was a capitalist, or this person was a socialist, the biggest religion of this system is capitalism. Capitalism is the biggest religion in the system of white supremacy, racism. More people have died for capitalism than any religion on the planet. Once again, more people have died and starved for capitalism. That's the biggest religion on the planet. It has the majority of the peoples on the planet living in poverty. You got 3 billion people surviving on about $1.50 a day. 3 billion people are surviving just on $1.50 a day. They can't even get some gas at the gas station for $1.50 a day. They could barely afford the dollar menu at Mickey D's for $1.50 a day. So this is where we find people like Fidel Castro. He's a product of white supremacy racism. But he's like that mosquito in the room. One person can make a difference. One person can make a difference. No matter how small or insignificant you think you are, one person can make a difference. And we're going to talk about Fidel Castro and that legacy and what we can learn from him, and also some of the misinformation, and also some of the information that need to be known by the people as it relates to Fidel Castro. You know, Charles Hamilton Houston said there are two type of lawyers. You got the social engineers, you got the social parasites, to paraphrase Charles Hamilton Houston, the former dean of Howard University Law School and the mentor of one Thurgood Marshall, the first black Supreme Court justice on U.S. Supreme Court. So he said that, and Fidel Castro was a lawyer by training, but he was a revolutionary by birth. He was a lawyer by training, but a revolutionary by birth. He definitely was that. He definitely was a social engineer. And it's just so important. I just want to say some things as I talk about Fidel Castro in this podcast. I just want to speak about some things in his own words. Let me start out with this quote with Fidel Castro. He was a person, I don't know, people say, did he believe in God? Well, he believed in revolution. And like he said, I began revolution with 82 men. If I had to do it again, I'll do it with 10 or 15 and absolute faith. It does not matter how small you are if you have faith and plan of action. Once again, Fidel Castro said, I began revolution with 82 men. If I had to do it again, I'd do it with 10 or 15 and absolute faith. It does not matter how small you are if you have faith and plan of action. Like I always tell people, revolutionaries don't start revolutions. I repeat, revolutionaries don't start revolutions. The people, regular everyday folk, start revolutions. It's the people wanting land and bread, like Malcolm said, that starts the revolution. All right? People that's wanting stuff. You look at Cuba, pre-revolution. Cuba was a plaything, was a exotic white supremacist getaway for the white elites, the so-called white elite. You know, the mafia controlled the casinos. Majority of the people of Cuba lived in poverty. These are people of color. These are black folk living in poverty. The majority of people living in poverty, while the minority, the 1%, enjoying all the ill-gotten gains, having a dictatorship, a political regime that really just catered to the 1%, that ignored the rest of the people on an island, living in filth, living in disrespect, living in hopelessness. There's a scene in Godfather 2, or Godfather 2 talks about the Cuba of that time. Talks about the people uprising, the Cuban Revolution, the 26th of July movement, the 5-year Revolutionary War that culminated in Castro overthrowing the Batista regime and leading his nation for decades to come, all at the age of 32. But he did it against a powerful regime. They had the backing of the system of white supremacy racism. They had all the trappings. Not only that, you had the mob. You had the multinational corporations controlling everything in Cuba. And Castro, somehow was able to overthrow all that. It's like what Brother Malcolm X said. They said that the Negro Revolution is controlled by foxy white liberals and the government. But the Black Revolution will be controlled by God. The Black Revolution will be controlled by God. And the Cuban Revolution was a Black revolution. It was a revolution ordained by God. It had to happen. And Castro was the one picked to lead that revolution, who was unlikely if you think about it. This guy, like I said, lawyer, upper middle class, had privilege, but yet he was the son of the people, of the everyday people. This guy had privilege. He said, forget my privilege. The majority of my countrymen and women are suffering. They need my help. Same thing with Che Guevara, his number two, his comrade, his ace Boon Coon. He was a medical doctor from Argentina. But, Motorcycle Diaries, that's a good movie that talks about him traveling throughout South America and seeing the majority of his people suffering throughout Latin America. And then he made the commitment to become a revolutionary, meeting Fidel Castro in Mexico back in 1954, after Fidel spent a year in jail, put in jail by Batista trying to overthrow the government. So he met Fidel, and their fates were sealed. So you think about all that. Motorcycle Diaries is a movie, and also it's the diary of Che Guevara. It should be read, and also check out the movie, because a lot of y'all like to look at movies. And I think everything in the movie is actual factual, which is not true, but it's another story, but it's a start. So Fidel, with his closest comrades, was able to overthrow Batista. And contrary to popular belief, Fidel was very much loved by white America. Fidel Castro was very much loved by white America. He was very charismatic, very articulate, well-grown spokesperson for his liberation cause. He was actually given a ticker tape parade in New York City. They gave him a ticker tape parade in New York City back in 1959. Fidel was the darling of Washington, D.C. He met with and was greeted by Vice President Richard Nixon, who was the vice president under President Dwight D. Eisenhower, former Supreme Commander of the Allied forces during World War II. He was his vice president. He met with Fidel Castro. Washington, D.C. didn't really know what to make of Fidel Castro. They didn't know what type of person he was. Like, where he's going to go. Was he in bed with the Soviets? Here's the thing about America, which is interesting. People always talk about how America is so powerful and big and so smart and so intelligent. But the American way of doing things are not always the best way of doing things. A lot of the problems we have in the world today from a geopolitical point of view is because this American system has overplayed its hand and underestimated its so-called enemies. It's because America overplayed its hand and underestimated its so-called enemies. We could have had a lot of friends, instead we made enemies. When I talk about this, because Fidel Castro actually wanted the support of the American government. And this is funny. This is not just with Fidel Castro. With Patrice Lumumba, the Prime Minister of the Congo, before he went with the Soviets, he tried to get support from America to help him lead his country. He wanted a partnership with America, but America didn't give a damn. And then when he went to the Soviets, that's when he became a problem. Same thing with Fidel Castro. He reached out to America first. America didn't know what to make of him. They, said whatever. He reached out to the Soviets because he needed protection and a system of white supremacy. He needed like a big brother to protect him. Just like how North Korea got big brother China, and even Russia. That's how Syria went to big brother Russia for protection from America, from its enemies. So you think about all this. I can go a decades earlier. Ho Chi Minh, who led the North Vietnamese resistance, the Vietnam War, the leader of the Vietnam War, Ho Chi Minh. Decades earlier, he tried to meet with President Woodrow Wilson, after World War I in Paris. Woodrow Wilson would not meet with Ho Chi Minh. And Ho Chi Minh was a great admirer of America. The Vietnamese Declaration of Independence, the Northern Vietnamese Declaration of Independence, is based on the American Declaration of Independence. Ho Chi Minh used to come to America just to listen to Marcus Garvey speak in Harlem. You can look all this up. This is back in the 19-teens. Okay? And Woodrow Wilson refused to meet with Ho Chi Minh. Some decades later, we get the Vietnam War. So America's way of doing diplomacy, so-called making the world safe for democracy, makes the world a vacuum for all types of wars and terrorism done by America. It's the same thing with Iran. Iran was the leading democracy of the Middle East back in the 50s. But when Iran wanted to nationalize its oil, then it became an enemy of white supremacy. You had the CIA, you had Teddy Roosevelt's grandson, with help from the CIA and British intelligence and BP, overthrow a democratically elected government in Iran. This is why today we have issues in Iran. Because of America overplaying and underestimating. Okay, you can look all this up. I'm trying to give you all this little bit of information and try to do it within an hour. So please forgive me. I can't. Where's Ricky? I can't find all this. Take a look. It's online. Okay, so I'm just trying to get all this laid out. So Castro, he reached out to America. America said, we ain't gonna deal with you. So this is when he went to the Soviets for protection, for backup. So this is when he became this threat. But you go online, look at all these pictures. Fidel kissing white women and kissing white babies, petting tigers at the zoo, whatever. Y'all eating hot dogs and ice cream. I mean, American media really, they was loving Castro. But like Malcolm said, the media is the most powerful entity on the planet. It makes your friends your enemies and your enemies your friends. So look all that up about Fidel Castro, how he was received at first by America and by Washington. How they gave him a parade in New York City. Now, Bobby Dick Gregory said the parade was down Pennsylvania Avenue. So, but actually it was down, and he came up it started from NYC Penn Station in New York City. And, and the parade proceeded there. So I say about Bobby Dick Gregory, people always trying to question his information. Like he said, his truth does not need your ignorance to validate it. Because what Bobby Dick Gregory does, he might not get you to the right house, but he gets you in the right zip code. He gets you in the right zip code. And it's really up on us to research this information so we can disseminate this. I don't know how many times we got to repeat, but we just got to keep on being repetitive. Because a part of learning is repetition. So when Baba say things over and over again, because he know he's talking to his people, and sometimes we hard-headed. We don't want to listen. We don't want to learn. We don't want to do for self. We don't want to research. Elijah Muhammad told us what the answer was. We won't accept it. It's do for self. Neely Fuller told us what the answers are. We won't accept it. You are your own organization. You as the individual are responsible for self. Self is your organization. Do for self. Create your own moral compass, your own moral codes. This is so important. Do for self. But when you do for self, you're doing for other people. So yeah, look it up about Castro being well received. So he went to the Soviets, then he became a threat. And people talking about, well, was he involved in the killing of President Kennedy? Now that's very interesting. Because Castro survived, they say, 638 assassination attempts that we know of. They say he has survived over 638 assassination attempts. He survived 9 presidents. All the mafia bosses that were involved in trying to get him, they gone. The CIA people, they gone. And Castro outlasted all of them by some years. Next year will be the 100th anniversary of President John F. Kennedy being born. He was born in 1917. He would have been 100 years old next year. And he was assassinated in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. His son, JFK Jr., was born November 25th, 1960. Fidel Castro, he died November 25th, 2016. I know a lot of y'all into numerology and stuff. I just thought that was fascinating because I didn't hear nobody talk about that. But it's interesting how Fidel Castro died on the birthday of John Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr. Now, JFK Jr., he was very fascinated about what really happened to his father. He never accepted the so-called official story the Warren Commission report. I'm sure a lot of people in his family, including his uncle Robert Kennedy Sr. and some other people, probably was in his ear as well about the Kennedy assassination. I'm sure his mom, Jackie Kennedy, had her own point of view about what happened to her late husband. So, and John Jr. definitely had his point of view. He started his George magazine. But before he died in the 90s, he actually went down to Cuba and met with Fidel Castro. They had a very long dinner because Fidel Castro was known to be long-winded. He was a lawyer and he was very brilliant. And he was known to have the hours upon hours of dinner conversations, right? So he met with JFK Jr. down in Cuba. They talked very extensively about what happened to his father, about Fidel thoughts about JFK Sr. and about America at the time, the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I believe that's probably one of the reasons why he was killed, JFK Jr., because he was really wanted to reveal what really happened. You got to think about when JFK Jr. was killed. I believe he was actually thinking about running to be U.S. Senator from New York, the seat that Hillary Clinton eventually won. Hillary Clinton eventually won the seat that JFK Jr. was thinking about running. So he died in July of 1999. I remember like it was yesterday, because I just came back from New York. I attended the National NAACP conference with my mom, my brother, and my aunt and my sister. We all went up there as a family trip for the NAACP convention. And I can remember that's just out coming back because we were celebrating their birthdays as well too. My mom and sister and brother were all born July. My mama and my sister shared the same birthday of July 18th. So it's happened like it was yesterday with Kennedy. So also it's familiar. I don't think any Kennedy family member endorsed Hillary for president. I could be mistaken, but you might want to look that up. Did any member of the Kennedy family clan endorse Hillary Clinton? Because you remember last time when Barack ran, Ted Kennedy, the late Ted Kennedy, he endorsed Barack Obama, as well as the Kennedy clan. Robert Kennedy, widow, Caroline Kennedy, they all endorsed Barack Obama, not Hillary, which is very, very fascinating. So there's something to be, I'm just saying. So let's say if he did have something to do with Kennedy being assassinated, would it be justified? It could be justifiable because of the many attempts that the U.S. government, under the orders of the CIA and other entities, made to try to kill Castro. Like over 638 attempts on his life, and probably many more than that we're not aware of on his life. So it's a thing. I always tell people there's some information I want to share with you, but I can't share with you everything in this time allotted period. But find out about Operation Northwoods. A lot of us know about the Bay of Pigs, right? We know about the Bay of Pigs invasion back in April of 61, April 17th to the 19th of 1961, where, Cubans, CIA, mafiosi people tried to invade Cuba via the Bay of Pigs, and it was put down. Castro army caught over 1,200 Cuban defectors who were trying to overthrow the communist regime of Castro at that time, and they beat them. And it was very much an embarrassment for the Kennedy administration. But they had a thing. I said Operation Northwoods. Now, Operation Northwoods was a thing that some people in the U.S. intelligence community wanted to initiate, where it would be where false flags would happen on U.S. soil. For example, shooting up people at movie theaters, blowing up buildings, whatever. All this will be done by our own people, but we'll put the blame on Cuba. They would say, well, Castro's Cuba was the reason why all those people got shot up in the movie theater. Or they the reason why that church got blown up. Sounds familiar today? No, ice, baby. Icy, baby. ISIS, baby. So you see what I'm saying? They'll find a boogeyman. They'll manufacture a boogeyman out of Castro so they could justify having war with Cuba. And President Kennedy, to his credit, he turned that plan down. He said, no, we ain't going to do it that way. We ain't going to do Operation Northwoods, where we are sabotaging and terrorizing our own people and blaming it on Cuba. Not going to do it that way. So look up Operation Northwoods and also Operation Mongoose or the Cuban Project. Operation Mongoose or the Cuban Project, this the Kennedy administration was very much involved in. This was a thing that they came up with. A guy at the Air Force named Admiral Lansdale, I believe his name was. He was the figurehead over this, but it involved the intelligence community. It involved defected Cuban nationals living in the Miami area. It involved the CIA. It involved mafiosi. And their plan was to create a terrorist campaign, terrorize Cuba, sabotage the inner workings of the Cuban government, try to assassinate Castro, destroy Cuban means of making itself economically stable. So you look at all this, Operation Mongoose. Robert Kennedy was knee deep in that. He helped train these people who was the terrorists who led the terrorist campaign. You know, the CIA recruited the mob. You know, John Roselli, one of Sam Giancana goons, one of his right-hand man, Chicago outfit, Sam Giancana, Santo Traficante, the mob boss, who was over casinos in Cuba, who headquarters was out of Tampa, Florida, I believe. And they all was involved in this. You could look all this stuff up. So they were trying to undermine Castro's credibility. They were trying to assassinate Castro and all this different stuff. Crazy stuff going on. And this is done by the U.S. government. Dr. King said the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet, my own government, was involved in trying to sabotage Castro and overthrow his regime in Cuba. Very unethical. But like Colin Powell said so many years ago on a morning show, that when you declare war, you call off civilization. When you declare war and engage in warfare, you are calling off civilization. The only rule in warfare is to win, baby, win. So Castro would have been justified if he killed Kennedy, right? Because he'd be protecting himself from this administration. But the thing about it is there's an alternative history. Like after the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, Castro and Kennedy, the Kennedy administration were in talks to try to normalize relations with Cuba. That what people are saying, including Robert Kennedy Jr., JFK's nephew, Robert Kennedy Sr.'s son, that the Kennedy administration was actually in talks with the Castro regime in order to normalize relations between Cuba and the USA. And I found that fascinating. I just want to put out this stuff. This is very fascinating stuff. And you can look all this stuff up. Castro said during his meeting with U.S. journalist Lisa Howard, Fidel Castro expressed his desire to come to a friendly understanding with the United States. Once again, he said during his meeting with U.S. journalist Lisa Howard, Fidel Castro expressed his desire to come to a friendly understanding with the United States. This is coming from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The source is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Not Robert F. Kennedy. Did I say Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Yeah, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's called the 25 Truths on the Secret Negotiations between Fidel Castro and President Kennedy. After the October 1962 missile crisis, a conflict that almost led to a nuclear disaster, and its resolution that included the withdrawal of Soviet missiles from Cuba and U.S. missiles from Turkey, President John F. Kennedy decided to undertake a process of normalization of relations with Cuba. During his trip to the Soviet Union in 1962, Fidel Castro spoke at length with Nikita Khrushchev about Kennedy. According to the former president's nephew, Castro returned to Cuba determined to find a path to reconciliation with the United States. In 1962, Kennedy commissioned James Donovan, a New York lawyer, and John Dolan, an advisor to Attorney General Robert Kennedy, to negotiate the release of the 1,500 Bay of Pig invaders held in Cuba. During his meeting with the Washington emissaries, Fidel Castro made clear his desire to normalize relations with the United States and maintain links based on sovereign equality, reciprocity, and non-interference in internal affairs. My father Robert and JFK were intensely curious about Castro and demanded detailed, highly personal descriptions of the Cuban leader from both Donovan and Nolan. The U.S. press had repeatedly caricatured Fidel as drunken, filthy, mercurial, violent, and undisciplined. However, Nolan told them, our oppression will not square with the commonly accepted image. Castro was never irritable, never drunk, never dirty. He and Donovan described the Cuban leader as worldly, witty, curious, well-informed, impeccably groomed, and an engaging conversationalist. Now, that's interesting. Like Malcolm said about the media, it'll make your friends your enemy and your enemies your friend. It's the most powerful force on the planet because it influences and controls the minds of the masses. Now, the interesting thing about James Donovan, the New York lawyer, this is the same lawyer that Tom Hanks portrayed recently in that Cold War drama about the Cold War, prisoner of war being exchanged. I don't know, it came out a couple years ago. But Dick always called him, that's Raul. But James Donovan was the lawyer that Tom Hanks portrayed in that movie that won an Oscar for his co-actor. Won an Oscar for the guy he was portraying a Soviet general who was undercover in America, a Soviet spy. And Tom Hanks was the negotiator, for him in exchange for some Americans who got trapped, American pilot, as well as an American student who was trapped in Soviet control during the Cold War. But that's a good movie to look at. But that's James Donovan that Tom Hanks played in that movie. I'll read some more of this because I think it's important. But the title of the article is Robert Kennedy Jr.'s 25 Truths on the Secret Negotiations Between Fidel Castro and President Kennedy. I'll read some more stuff. The two visitors were also impressed by the popular support the revolutionary government enjoyed. They confirmed the CIA's internal reports of Castro's overwhelming popularity with the Cuban people following their many trips with Castro throughout the country, and after witnessing the spontaneous ovations he received as he entered baseball stadiums. John F. Kennedy was aware of the Cuban people's desire for independence and dignity and understood the source of the widespread resentment against the United States. For his part, JFK began thinking seriously about the resumption of relations with Castro. Any initiative in this direction, however, would find him navigating in troubled waters. The mere mention of him doing business with Fidel would have the effect of a political bombshell during the run-up to the presidential elections of 1964. In September 1963, Kennedy charged William Atwood, former journalist and U.S. diplomat to the United Nations, with opening secret negotiations with Castro. Now, this is September 1963 that Kennedy does this to try to get something going on. 1963, we know what happened November 22nd, 1963. And Kennedy was also in the process of pulling troops out of Vietnam before it escalated any further. So Kennedy was doing a couple of things. In the process of pulling troops out of Vietnam, and also in the process of normalizing relations with Fidel Castro's Cuba. So imagine if Kennedy had lived, we would have never gotten involved in Vietnam, which could have been avoided decades earlier if Woodrow Wilson would have just sat down with Ho Chi Minh in Paris during the peace accords in 1919. And also, you got him trying to normalize relations with Cuba, which could have prevented the decades and decades upon decades of the United States doing an embargo against Cuba. So once he did, all this stuff stopped to exist. Matter of fact, it was the false flag Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964, which escalated U.S. involvement in Vietnam. And although, according to his son, Robert F. Kennedy Sr. still wanted to pursue a path towards reconciliation and normalizing relations with Cuba, the Lyndon B. Johnson administration didn't want any part of that for whatever reason. They didn't want to do normalization with Cuba at that point. So that is what it is, So this is some of the history that's available out there. Just look for this stuff. Just look for it. It's so important. And also, I'm going to read some more I think it's important to talk about. The same month, President Kennedy established another secret communications channel with Castro through French journalist Jean Daniel. Before traveling to Cuba to interview the Cuban Prime Minister, Daniel met with JFK in the White House, where he was charged with delivering a message to Castro. Okay, Castro responds, I think Kennedy is sincere. I also think that his expression of sincerity could have political significance today. Fidel Castro is said to have replied to John Daniel. He still has the possibility of becoming, in the eyes of history, the United States' greatest president, the leader who finally understood that coexistence between capitalists and socialists is possible, even on the American continent. This will make him an even greater president than Lincoln. Wow. So even Fidel Castro had some type of respect for Kennedy. Thought he could possibly do business with Kennedy. And this could be resolved. Interesting. However, the CIA was not happy to hear about all this, this kumbaya coming together of Cuba and the United States. They were not for that because they had a lot invested in overthrowing Castro regime. Even made a deal with the devil as far as I'm concerned, working with the mob and working with the folks who were defected Cuban nationalists. You can read all about this. I think it's important too. I had a chance a couple years ago to interview brother Abraham Bowden. If you don't know who Abraham Bowden is, you need to look him up because he is a true American hero in my mind. Abraham Bowden was the first black Secret Service agent to serve on a presidential detail. He was actually appointed by President John F. Kennedy himself. JFK saw or discovered Abraham Bowden during an event in Chicago, which was hosted by Mayor Gangster Richard Daley. Richard Daley is an interesting character. Y'all need to look him up. He's the reason why Kennedy became president because they had some dead folks voting in Chicago, in Cook County, and Gangster Daley had his hand in that because had Kennedy not win Illinois, Nixon would have been president. And you can make the claim that Nixon was president, but it was stolen from him. He was robbed. See, that robbed Nixon. See, that robbed Tricky Dicky. But anyway, Kennedy went into the basement of the building where the event was held to the restroom, and Abraham Bowden was just so happened to be standing or guarding the so-called restroom. So I guess they wanted to put the black Secret Service agent out of mind and out of sight, not realizing that they were setting up a date with destiny because President Kennedy really admired Abraham Bowden. He said, I want to select you as my personal detail. So he became the first black Secret Service agent to serve on a president's detail. But he did not like how some of the Secret Service agents viewed the president. He thought they were very unprofessional, and a lot of them were very racist because a lot of these Secret Service guys were from the South. And, he talked about how they used to call him nigger, and they'll have a hangman noose at his desk, all types of stuff that white folks be doing. And so he had to, resign, but he was worried about the safety of the president. And he told his superiors in the Secret Service that he was concerned about the president's safety. He felt like a lot of the Secret Service people were not being professional, did not make the president's safety a priority, were doing things, were very unethical on the job. You talking about all these scandals recently with the Secret Service messing around with prostitutes and doing cocaine and drugs. This has always been a part of the Secret Service. You got to think about it. Who was the president that created the Secret Service? Abraham Lincoln. I rest my case. What happened to Abraham Lincoln, y'all? Come on. And Castro compared Kennedy. He could be like Abraham Lincoln. And a lot of people make this thing about their administrations being eerily similar, whatever. But they let you know the president's life was in danger. So Abraham Bowden, the Secret Service, it operates out of the Department of Treasury. Back then, I think it still does now. And so Abraham Bowden, he lived in and was stationed in Chicago, and he was like the Michael Jordan of Secret Service people because he was able to break up so many counterfeit rings in the Chicago area involving organized crime. So he had a 100% conviction rate, in the court. He never lost a case. He always got his man. But also he discovered a plot to assassinate President Kennedy at the Army-Navy game in Chicago at Soldiers Field, I believe. It was a plot to assassinate Kennedy. So Kennedy, they tried to get Kennedy several times before Dallas in November 22nd, 1963. And one of the times was in Chicago during the Army-Navy game. So Abraham Bowden, he found out about a large number of Cuban nationals in the Chicago area with heavy artillery. He thought that was strange. He found that President Kennedy was going to be in Chicago during the Army-Navy game. So he contacted his superiors, and Robert Kennedy was able to stop the president, because Robert Kennedy was the #1 lawman in the land. He was the attorney general as well as the president's brother. He was able to stop President Kennedy from attending the Army-Navy game, where he could have quite possibly been assassinated, because they also tried to get him in Miami, but they finally got him in Dallas. So Abraham Bowden was a part of that. And like I said, before he left his presidential detail, he told his authorities that the president's life was in danger. So when the president was assassinated in Dallas, Abraham Bowden, he was a great American patriot and all this stuff, very sincere guy. He was very heartbroken by this. And he wanted to testify before the Warren Commission. And the powers that be got hold of that, because they were actually in talks of getting rid of the Secret Service. After the president was killed, people, rightfully so, blame a lot of it on the Secret Service, because it was rumors going around that the Secret Service was partying in Dallas, strip clubs and all this stuff, doing drugs, all this crap, and they were not professional, and that he never should have been going down a street with all those type of tall buildings where he was exposed. And actually the route was changed, I believe, at the last minute. So there's a lot of things in hindsight that should never happen. And so Abraham Bowden, doing his duty as a concerned American citizen, as a professional, he wanted to testify before the Warren Commission. I believe he made a call on a phone, and the phone was tapped, and they basically, he was framed for being a part of a counterfeit ring in Chicago. So he was never able to testify. He spent 5 years of his life in jail. I mean, they had him in Leavenworth. They had him in all the places where he put away all these counterfeiters, all these organized crime people. So they basically try to get the brother killed in prison, put him in the same prisons, the same notorious prisons as some of the people he put away by his diligent and professional work that he was doing as a Secret Service agent, as well as a agent of the Treasury Department. So his book, you should read his autobiography, Echo from Dealey Plaza. It's a book worth reading. And like I said, We.All.B interviewed him a couple years ago on his birthday, actually. And he's one of my favorite people that I interviewed. His show is one of our most popular shows that people listen to. So that's definitely worth listening to, the Abraham Bowden interview we did on We.All.B a couple years ago. But yeah, he was put in prison for trying to tell what he knew about the Secret Service not being professional when it came to the life of the president. So I like to say this to people: it's always an inside job when it comes to things of assassinations and things like that. The person who planned Pearl Harbor, or Emerald Yamamoto. Emerald Yamamoto was trained by the United States of America. He went to Harvard University. We taught him how to fly airplanes. America did that for Emerald Yamamoto. My understanding, he was hesitant to hit America, but his superiors told him we got to hit America. But he was trained by us. The 9/11 hijackers, supposedly, they went to a flight school down in Florida owned by Warren Buffett. Robert E. Lee, all them, during the Civil War, they went to West Point and all that. That's why they knew each other's strategies and stuff. They all were students together at West Point. America created its terrorists. Another person y'all should look up is Smedley Butler. Smedley Butler was a 2-time Medal of Honor recipient. Think about that. That's insane. He was a 2-time Medal of Honor recipient. A legendary, probably the greatest Marine that ever lived. They call him the Fighting Quaker. He's from Pennsylvania. He was from Pennsylvania. He got his Medal of Honor medals for his part in the Boxer Rebellion and also in the Spanish-American War. But he was approached by the Wall Street elite, the Wall Street bankers back in the 30s. They wanted to get rid of one of their own, Franklin Roosevelt, who was president. They wanted to get rid of Franklin Roosevelt, overthrow the government, and take it over. And they wanted to install General Smedley Butler as the president of the United States. But unfortunately for them, Smedley Butler was not going along with the program. So he actually went to the press, went to J. Edgar Hoover, went to Congress and let them know about what happened. And people tried to dismiss him as a conspiracy hack or quack. And really, in hindsight, they probably should have went to General MacArthur. He probably would have went along with it. They went to the wrong general. So Smedley Butler was a whistleblower back in the 30s about what the Wall Street elite was trying to do with the American government. And he wrote a couple of books. He died in 1940. But he coined the slogan, "War is Hell," because he was a decorated Marine, but he realized that he was no better than Al Capone because he was a racketeer, so to speak. He was not fighting for the protection of the sovereignty of America, of the People's Republic. He was fighting on behalf of the interests of multinational corporations to make more money off the working people of the world, of people of color. He was responsible for setting up banana republics in other places so the multinationals can control the resources of those countries. People talk about that book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This guy was doing that decades before. Like he said, I was bigger than Al Capone because whereas Al Capone operated in Chicago, I was operating on several different continents. So he realized the role of the military industry complex to uphold the interests of the multinational corporations and the banksters. And a lot of his stuff is available online. You can read a lot of his material online. General Smedley Butler, the Fighting Quaker. Okay, another true patriot, if you want to say that word. So I say all this to say that when people accused Castro of trying to kill Kennedy, it was like Malcolm said, the chickens just came home to roost. You do all this stuff to other people around the world, it's karma. So I don't believe Castro had a big role in trying to kill Kennedy. Actually, if you look at the alternative history that I put out there, I say alternative, not because it's make-believe or fantasy, but it's the history that they don't really want you to know about. It's another way of looking at the history. It's your own window seat. Like, listen to Erykah Badu about that window seat. So you can find all that online. I ain't gonna go through everything, but you can find all that online. And then I want to get to the fact, did Fidel betray Che Guevara? That's the elephant in the room. Like, I've been looking at recent articles that have been coming out since the passing of Castro, talking about Fidel betraying Che Guevara, setting him up in Bolivia on a suicide mission, which is interesting because there's a couple books out there now that's been out. One book came out a couple years ago, another book came out recently. These are people that work with both Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. They was in that inner circle of the revolutionaries, and they said, that Castro actually had a commando unit ready to rescue Che and his guerrillas in Bolivia, but he never told him to go. He never gave him the green light to go get Che Guevara. Never. So this is a point of contention for a lot of people. Did Castro betray Che? Well, let's talk about their falling out. You want to think about the falling out, okay? Back in 1965, Che Guevara attended the Afro-Asian Conference in Algiers. This is back in 1965. And Che Guevara said something to the fact that the Soviet Union was no better than America or the U.S. empire because they both are trying to exploit the working people of the world. Basically was saying that, one white daddy ain't better than the other white daddy. It's all about white supremacy. Because Che also famously or infamously said, we need to make more Vietnams. Meaning we need to disrupt the system and make it hard for them, these imperialists, to do business in their own system. Bleed them dry by fighting these wars of attrition, whatever, in different places. The people need to rise up. Because to me, Che was more of a romantic ideologue than Castro was. Castro, in my opinion, is like a Mandela. He's a survivor and he's a master politician. He's not really beholden to a certain ideology. He tried to adapt, and also what he tries to do is that he puts the people interest before his own. I really do believe he had the interest of the Cuban people before his own interests. I mean, that's how I feel about it. And even a dear friend like Che Guevara could not come before the interests of the people, before the welfare of his country. Because Che was born an Argentinian, but he was a true revolutionary. He belonged to the world, but he was not the leader of a government as in the way Fidel was. He had responsibilities, and Che made it hard for Fidel to do business with the Soviets. When Che said all the stuff he said about the Soviets being no better than America at that Afro-Asian conference in Algiers, it made Fidel hard for him to do business with the Soviets because he was in the process of getting some military backup and other resources from the Soviets. Because the Cuban economy, the Cuban government was very much dependent on the Soviets to be big brother, okay, to be their backup, to have their back. So the Cuba, even in this white supremacist system, was not really independent because they needed help from the Soviets in order to maintain some sense of protection from the U.S. imperialists. Okay, so that was interesting. So Che, he resigned his position in the government in a letter to Castro back in 1965. The letter is available online. Che Guevara's letter of resignation. You can look it up, Google it up, and read it in its entirety. And so Che, he wanted to start a revolution in Latin America similar to the one that happened in Cuba, to the 26th of July movement, which was the Cuban Revolution. He wanted to start that around Latin America because of what he saw during his travels, like the motorcycle diaries. He wanted to free and liberate the people of Latin America in the same vein as a Simon Bolivar or somebody like that. But what people don't understand, I call these our black liberation movements because all this stuff was inspired by the Haitian Revolution. Even Cuba's original revolutionary, Antonio Maceo, was Afro-Cuban. Antonio Maceo was Afro-Cuban. He was the original revolutionary. He came decades before Castro. It's 19th century. Late 19th century Cuba, he was the leader of that revolution before the 26th of July movement. So Che wanted to liberate all the working class and poor of the world. So he had the wanderlust. So Castro, I guess he sent him to Bolivia. But the problem with Bolivia is that the peasants there, they had control of their land. It was not the same situation in Cuba back in the 50s per se, where the capitalists were controlling the land and the people was like this sharecropping. The peasants in Bolivia actually had control of their land also, so their ideologies was not lining up. Okay, so basically Che was sent on a suicide mission. And I guess he wrote in his diary, he was trying to connect with Cuba. He found out that he was in this viper's nest, this muck and mire of a mess in Bolivia. And I believe he was trying to find a way out. But he lost connection with Cuba. Because he kept on saying, I believe in his diary, he said no word from Manila. Manila was the code name for Castro. No word from Manila. That's the code name from Castro. Okay. So I guess at the end, Che felt betrayed by Castro. I'm sure he did, because he never got any word from Castro. And from several sources, you can find this online. This Google, did Fidel Castro betray Che Guevara? That they had a rescue squad in Cuba, in Havana, ready to rescue and pull out Che Guevara and his remaining guerrillas. But the word was never sent by Castro. And so Che was assassinated, or was murdered, was lynched, whatever you want to call it, in Bolivia, probably knowing that his closest associate, his comrade, betrayed him. Man, that's something deep. Man. I mean, this is not a bed of roses. Like Fidel Castro revolution is not a bed of roses. Hard decisions must be made, because even Che Guevara, he was a medical doctor by trade, but he also killed a lot of people. He executed a lot of people for the revolution. Medical doctors take these oaths, this Hippocratic oath, whatever you want to call it, the Hippocratic oath or whatever, do no harm. But here's this guy, trained as a medical doctor, took that oath, but yet he's over here killing people for revolution, for liberation. Being the first person to put somebody to death if there was one that said, hey, he betrayed the cause, he betrayed the revolution. I'll be the one to put the bullet in their head, okay? And then he examined the body. It's like Jay-Z said, I'm Che Guevara with bling on. I'm complex. This shit is complex, y'all. It's really complex. So did Fidel betray Che Guevara? You could say yes, then you could say no. Because he put the interest of his country before any one individual, including his friendship with this guy who they're like brothers. They were close like that. And yeah, he was willing to sacrifice, or did he sacrifice, but he was willing to give up Che for his country. I mean, like President Obama, he made some hard decisions. He sent drone strikes out there, killing innocent people as well, try to get the so-called enemy target. A lot of people have died for presidents and died in wars and whatnot. And like Malcolm said, ain't no such thing as a bloodless revolution. So that's something that it could be, I can see the pros and cons on both sides. I can see people saying, well, Fidel did not betray Che because he had bigger obligations than Che. And Che also knew the risk he was taking when he undertook these missions. Like he understood that the revolution could cost him his life. And Fidel said, you know what? Che was kind of like that pebble in the shoe. It's kind of like did Elijah Muhammad betray Malcolm X? You got to look at the context of the thing. I mean, or did Malcolm betray Elijah Muhammad? Well, study history. I studied alternative history. Like I keep on saying this. I'm gonna keep on saying this. The person who was the National Secretary for the Nation of Islam, who was responsible for communications between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad, is a guy named John Ali, who is, my understanding, he's still alive. I believe he lives in Texas, though I read from sources. I don't know, but he's allegedly still alive. He was FBI. So the guy responsible for communication between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad was an FBI mole in the Nation of Islam. So you don't know what happened between Che and Fidel, what type of misinformation happened between them, and because Fidel had some people that were involved in the revolution. They betrayed the revolution. They defected to Miami. They ended up working with the CIA and Operation Mongoose. Some of these people have. They were disillusioned by the revolution. They thought the revolution was a success, but how Castro handled that success afterwards in order to build the government, the regime, they were in question with. Even Fidel Castro's sister, she defected to Miami, I believe, back in 1965. I think at first she was in agreement with her brother, but he said, no, I don't agree with the way he's handling things. And people accused Fidel Castro of violating human rights and all this stuff. But the United States, nobody on the planet, no government on the planet is in a position or is qualified to say that Fidel Castro violated anybody's human rights. The United States is 5% of the world population, but got 25% of the world's prison population. There's more prisoners in America than in China or Russia or in Iran or anywhere else. North Korea, anywhere else, it says a terrible place. Afghanistan, more prisoners in America, all for capitalism. Because the 13th Amendment never abolished slavery. It made the way for private prisons. And that's another conversation. But like I said, when you are a polarizing figure like Fidel Castro, that means your life had some type of substance. That means you made some type of contribution, some type of mark on humanity that won't be forgotten anytime soon. That your legacy will keep on being reassessed by so-called historians and other folk. So, I mean, even when you see Cubans celebrating in Miami, white Cuban Americans celebrating in Miami, you must realize the majority of the Cubans in Cuba are dark-skinned Cubans, are Afro-Latinos with African roots, and they love Fidel, because Fidel almost wiped out the illiteracy rate in Cuba. Because you had an island before the revolution that was majority illiterate and poor, uneducated. Now you have people that like almost 100% literacy rate, got some of the best healthcare in the world. As a matter of fact, if you're a black person, you could go to, if you're a black American, you could go to a medical school in Cuba for free. I have a friend, Mukasa Dada, Willie Ricks, aka Willie Ricks, Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael's right-hand man, the guy who helped coin the phrase Black Power with Stokely Carmichael back in Greenwood, Mississippi, back in 1966. His son recently graduated from medical school in Cuba. And he said, man, just come on down, because all they want you to do, get that medical knowledge, get your degree, get your license, and then go back and help your people. Go back and give the gift of healthcare to your people, to your community that needs it. Fidel Castro in the post-Hurricane FEMA Katrina, he tried to send, I want to say 1,600 medical doctors from Cuba, somewhere in that number, to the Gulf Coast in order to help provide relief for people that need medical help. And our United States government turned him down. Okay, so what they say about a person supposed to be this evil man, this tyrant. And sometimes, in order to create democracy, you need somebody that's a strong man, that's aggressive, because you need that. Because a lot of times people don't know what they really want. World history is always decided by a minority. It's never the majority. It's always minority. I said earlier that the people start revolutions, but it's the revolutionaries that come behind the people in order to put things in order, so that energy, that the revolution won't die out in vain. They take their energy and rechannel that energy into building institutions, into supporting their ideologies, stuff like that. So yeah, the people started, but the people a lot of times, they don't know what they want. They just know they want something better than what they already have or been getting. This is how you start revolutions, okay? Castro had a couple comrades that were close to him that passed away early. Not just Che Guevara, but also this guy named Brother Camilo Cienfuegos. He was a comrade that was close to both Che and Fidel Castro. He was a leader of the revolution, a very charismatic figure. He also had a beard like Castro, had a big old cowboy hat, a very iconic figure in Cuban revolutionary history. He actually disappeared while flying on an airplane. October 28th, 1959. He was just 28 years old. Nobody knew what happened to him. Some people accused Castro of killing Camilo Cienfuegos, but he was very loyal to the revolution. So I don't know. So it's easy to blame Fidel for everything, because I wasn't there. He disappeared, but he is honored every year in Cuba as a national hero. So like I said, there's no such thing, like what Malcolm said, a bloodless revolution. People die. Now I'm a believer that people die when they're supposed to die. I don't believe that people die before their time and all this other stuff, because it's not for me to say when people are supposed to die. I believe that once the universe is done with you and that you completed your mission, whatever that mission may be, that you go. It just be your time. Okay. So, there's a lot of things about Castro that's fascinating that could be looked upon. And I'm going to read a couple more quotes from Fidel Castro. I think they are very relevant to today. I think they're very important. With what moral authority can the U.S. speak of human rights? The rulers of a nation in which the millionaire and beggar coexist, where the Indian is exterminated, the black man is discriminated against, the woman is prostituted, and the great masses of Chicanos, Puerto Ricans, and Latin Americans are scorned, exploited, and humiliated, where the CIA organizes plans of global subversion and espionage, and the Pentagon creates neutron bombs capable of preserving material assets and wiping out human beings. That's Fidel Castro. Another one, quote by Fidel Castro. Why do some people have to go barefoot so that others can drive luxury cars? Why are some people able to live only 35 years in order that others can live 70 years? Why do some people have to be miserably poor in order that others can be extravagantly rich? I speak for all the children in the world who don't even have a piece of bread. Capitalism has neither the capacity, nor the morality, nor the ethics to solve the problems of poverty. And remember, in the words of Fidel Castro, condemn me, it does not matter. History will absolve me. Like Castro said, after surviving 638 assassination attempts, if surviving assassination attempts were an Olympic event, I will win the gold medal. One of the greatest benefits of revolution is that even our prostitutes are college graduates. Same thing with, let's talk about Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez. Did Castro kill Hugo Chavez? I know Baba Dick Gregory He's been on my show a couple times, and he still stand by his statement that Fidel Castro, he believes he's an agent, and that Hugo Chavez, who being treated by cancer, like Hugo Chavez, believe he got cancer that they give you, the government give you, or that these white supremacists give you to get rid of you if you go against their rule of law. And he probably did get that because they had a coup d'etat, I believe, back in 2001 where he was allegedly kidnapped, but he was able to retain back control of his government down in Venezuela. Because you got to think about it, coup d'etats are usually initiated through the military. Like up in Egypt a couple years ago, they always use the military to overthrow the government. That's how you initiate coup d'etats. And a lot of times, the people behind the coup d'etats are people like the CIA from history. I'm looking at history, okay? So he was able to retain power because he had a military background. He was just not just a politician telling folks to die. He was a commando. So he's able to get back that power, and he was a threat to white power. He called George W. Bush a devil, all that stuff. But also, he did a lot of things to help America, like especially out of the Northeast during the wintertime. He provided, I believe, oil and stuff for people to have warmth in the wintertime up in the Northeast. So he was very generous with Venezuela's resources, but also he was in that legacy of Simon Bolivar. He wanted Latin America to be strong, to be unified, like a Simon Bolivar. He was, he loved, Hugo Chavez was respected by a lot of black people, a lot of black radicals and militants. That's another thing about Castro. Cuba was a safe haven for a lot of black radicals and militants, like brother Robert F. Williams and his wife, Sister Mabel Williams, who died recently. They defected to Cuba after having some legal trouble in North Carolina. Robert F. Williams is the author of Negroes with Guns. He was the president of the Monroe, North Carolina chapter NAACP. He was a badass. He was a former Marine, well versed in martial arts and in artillery. And they got into shootouts with the Klan in Monroe, North Carolina. These were black people that were not to be trifled with. And so they were accused of kidnapping this white family during a disturbance in the black community. And from their perspective, they were trying to protect the lives of these white people that seemed to be lost in wrong place, wrong time. But they were accused of kidnapping these white people. So they was able to escape to Cuba. And Castro treating them as special guests of the state. They actually started a radio program called Radio Free Dixie, where they were able to broadcast. They had a frequency that reached all the way up until, I guess, Seattle, Washington, of all places. They were telling black folks about what was going on in America, that they need to rebel. So they was able to have a radio program in Cuba for a couple of years, and they was treated as guests of the state. And I believe there's a story. You can find this online, probably on the book Negro with a Gun, I'm sure, that Che Guevara approached Robert F. Williams in an angry manner because he was disgusted about what Dr. King was saying about the conditions of black people in the United States or something like that. And Robert F. Williams basically told him, hey, look, all black folks don't think like him. He don't represent all black people. Black folks are catching hell. So that was a different time. Like I said, a lot of us don't know our history. We're not well versed in history. Malcolm X was killed for a lot of reasons, but the main reason he probably was killed because he was getting in the way of policy. Because Malcolm was well traveled, well respected throughout the African diaspora. He had a lot of influence, a lot of respect, and he was getting himself in a position to influence foreign policy. Like he wanted to bring the United States up on charges for civil rights violations and present the case before the UN. Had a friend, the Kenyan freedom fighter and journalist DePinto, was working with him. Malcolm X was assassinated February 21st in front of his family in Harlem. They killed DePinto February 25th, 1965 in front of his daughter. And so look up those names. But anyway, getting back to all of that, and Robert F. Williams, he ended up leaving Cuba for China. And he was a guest of Chairman Mao. And also, he was getting homesick. So a deal was made with the Nixon administration. He gave him intel about the Chinese government and all this stuff and connections in exchange for them dropping the charges against him. And so he was able to come back to America. And that's really the backstory of how Richard Nixon became the first president the first U.S. president to visit China, based on the information and the connections that Robert F. Williams, this black dude from North Carolina, was able to provide him. He was able to get back to America. He ended up dying in 1996 of leukemia in his 70s. But a lot of us are not familiar with the name Robert F. Williams. So check out his book, Negroes with Guns, and also look him up and look up his wife, Mabel, who died, I believe, in 2013. So, Assata Shakur, she's, supposedly down there. I'm not sure about that. I don't know if she's still alive, to be honest with you. I don't know. We haven't heard from Assata Shakur in years. So I don't know what's going on, man. It's a lot of stuff going on that a lot of us don't have an understanding of. Like, even now, what I'm doing is I'm taking a little bit of information I have learned, and just from talking to other people, I'm putting my own perspective out there. But it's not the definitive perspective. It's some food for thought. It's some things I think that should have been out there that have not been discussed to a certain length of our life, would have been discussed or brought up, particularly like the Che Guevara, Castro, betray Che type of thing, and also with Hugo Chavez. I'm getting off a point. Hugo Chavez was an interesting, conflicting figure, polarizing figure like Fidel. Just didn't have the length of years like a Fidel Castro, but he was getting treatment for his cancer in Cuba. It took a turn for the worse, and he died in 2013. But did Castro knowingly kill Hugo Chavez? I don't know. People put out a lot of things. Everybody got to die. And I don't believe that anybody dies a natural death in the white supremacy racism system. Because they kill us all types of ways. This system is a murder machine. They got stuff called medicine that kill you quicker than cancer. They call it medicine though. But it's killing people. Water, killing folks. Food. They put stuff that's not food in food, and it's killing you. Killing your mind, dulling your intellectual curiosity. So why would they trust you with the vote when you can't even think for self? When your mind is so distracted. Bread and circuses. What Caesar told Mark Antony, give them bread and circuses. Keep them entertained and fed, they won't complain. Keep them fed, entertained, and they won't complain. Okay? So, also, I believe Huey Newton, he went down to Cuba when he had the trouble. I think they say he killed a prostitute, and he was able to go down to Cuba to escape the authorities. And people also, like with Fidel Castro, if he's such an enemy of the United States, how come there's a naval base, Gitmo Bay, is on Cuba, is in Cuba? Why is there a U.S. naval base on the island of Cuba? That's a good question. I had an uncle, my great uncle Frenchie, who is a Navy man and also a journalist. He found and owns the oldest black-owned newspaper in the state of South Carolina, known as the Charleston Chronicle. He was a quote-unquote prisoner of war during the Cuban Revolutionary. He was there during the Cuban Revolution when Fidel revolutionaries and guerrillas ran Batista out of Cuba back in 1959. He was a quote-unquote prisoner of war, then became an ambassador of goodwill. And he had a chance to interview Fidel Castro. And he said he struck him basically as a man who did right by the majority of the people in Cuba. And I got that interview I did with Uncle Frenchie a couple years ago. My Uncle James French, who actually has a street named after him in Charleston. And it's an honor to have met him and to get that story from Uncle Frenchie about Fidel, because he was there. And he said there was a prisoner of war. They enjoyed themselves, had women and drinks and stuff, and people were happy. So I just want to say, why is that? Well, I'd like to say, once the United States go anywhere in the world, when do they leave? We got military bases and whatnot throughout the whole world. Is World War II over? Yet we got bases in Germany and Japan. Once the United States gets somewhere, we never leave. It's hard for us to leave. We got the world's most powerful navy. I guess we're pirates, all right? We're the biggest pirates in the world, right? I guess, I don't know. So I say all this to say that it's complex, all right? Like what Jay-Z rapped about Che Guevara with bling on. Very complex. So I would think that, like a lot of us, why do black people feel the need to make the world safe for democracy when we're not even citizens in our own country we pledge allegiance to? Why do black folks throughout the generation feel or felt the need to make the world safe for democracy when we are not even citizens in the country we pledge allegiance to? Charles Hamilton Houston, the mentor of Thurgood Marshall, the first black U.S. Supreme Court Justice, Charles Hamilton Houston was an officer in the Army during World War I. He almost was lynched by quote-unquote American doughboys, white American soldiers in full uniform in France, I believe, of all places, during the Great War, the quote-unquote Great War. They almost lynched the future dean of Howard University Law School and the mentor of George Washington and the mentor of Thurgood Marshall in France while in uniform, because the white boys was mad they couldn't get at this white French woman, I guess, and they thought the black men were their competition. So I think he was with a group of other black soldiers, and he happened to be a lieutenant. I believe he was a lieutenant in that war. You can look all this up on Google. You can Google this up. So this is the mindset that we're dealing with here. I know even the great civil rights activist and Mississippi freedom fighter and veteran himself, Amzie Moore, down in Mississippi, he talked about how there were black soldiers, black GIs turning up in the waterways of Mississippi Delta, lynched and killed. He actually wrote the State Department about what was happening to black GIs in Mississippi. And then it eventually stopped. Or about the Camp Van Dorn massacre in southern Mississippi, where it was alleged back in, I believe, either 43 or 44 at Camp Van Dorn in Mississippi, that over 1,000 GIs were massacred by white military policemen. And it was a cover-up. That was being investigated by the NAACP and even U.S. Congressman Benny Thompson, the congressman from Mississippi. He wanted the Justice Department, FBI and all them to investigate. And they were investigating this, and then 9/11 happened, and it quieted down. So you got the Camp Van Dorn massacre. You got the fact that black men were coming home from these wars, making the world safe for democracy, and being lynched in full uniform. Even Emmett Till's father, Louis Till, was killed by the United States military. He was executed for allegedly raping and murdering white women, supposedly, over in Europe. The thing about it is, his mom was only able to identify Emmett's body by his father's ring with the initials LT on it. Emmett Till's father was named Louis Till. And so when the trial was happening for them three white boys, the brothers J.W. Milam and Roy Bryant, for killing Emmett Till, Senator James Eastland, the Democrat from Mississippi, a very powerful senator from Mississippi, was able to, I guess, provide the white stream media with files talking about his father. For years, the family tried to get the U.S. government to reveal what happened to Emmett's father. And his mama tried to get the government for years to reveal what happened to Emmett's father, but they wouldn't do it. But Senator James Eastland, on a smear campaign against Emmett Till, sounds familiar? Remember how they did Mike Brown and Trayvon Martin and any other black male that end up dead at the hands of white supremacy racism? They smear and character assassinate the dead victim. So this is what they did with Emmett Till. So they're saying if his father was put to death by the military for raping and killing white women, then his son doesn't fall too far from the tree. The fruit doesn't fall too far from the tree. Okay, you can look all that up. Look up Louis Till and Senator James Eastland. So I say all this to say the United States is not any type of position to really be a champion for human civil rights, all right? Especially as it pertains to black people, African American people. And yet you got black folks that signed up generations upon generations in the military. It's complex, y'all. So when we talk about, okay, there's a naval base in Cuba, a U.S. naval base, but yet Castro's a supposed enemy of America, When in actuality, Castro wasn't really that much of a threat. When you think about it, America is very tricky like that. They had us believing Saddam Hussein was a threat, and we invaded Iraq. They had us believing that Gaddafi was a threat, and we invaded Libya. But we're never going to invade North Korea, because North Korea got China, got Big Brother China, and even got Russia. Syria got Russia. They got Big Brother Russia. So what I'm saying is the United States always invade places where they got control over these people and their regimes. You know, they had a no-fly zone in Iraq. They were starving the people. They were starving the babies. We were starving the babies in Iraq. So how can, if you have a no-fly zone over in Iraq, how can he be responsible for 9/11, people? When that UN inspector said there was no weapons of mass destruction around, that German inspector, and we didn't listen to him. Well, because when they blow up the United States, it's gonna be blowing up everybody. Nobody's innocent. Like Baba Dick Gregory said, I'm paying taxes on them to send drones to kill people at their weddings. So I'm not innocent. There's a lot of people in jail for things they did not do, but nobody's innocent. You understand? You might be sitting in jail for something you didn't do, but you're not innocent of some other stuff. You're guilty of other things. It's like I'm guilty of other things. Okay? We all, it's human beings, human nature, right? So I say all this to say, everything is complex. It's like you look at Mississippi and places like Alabama, Mississippi, places like that. They have their civil rights museums and their civil rights trails and their blues trails. And American government, they want to create the Trail of Tears. You know, the first Democratic elected president, Andrew Jackson, sent all those Native Americans on their way. You know, you had Native Americans or Indians that own black people. Very complex, y'all. You know, this is complex history, but yet you making money, millions of dollars off of tourism on black people pain and misery, but yet the people who lost family members, who are victims of this system, have yet to be compensated for their pain and misery and exploitation. It's like you look at the family of Henrietta Lacks. No disrespect to Rebecca LaSclute. She wrote the book about the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks. But the medical industry complex have made billions of dollars off her immortal sales. But yet her family in Baltimore can't afford health insurance. They took her sales without her consent. She died of ovarian cancer, I believe at the age of 29. A poor working class black woman. And yet the white supremacists were able to replicate her sales because they couldn't die. And they made billions and billions of dollars. And they still making money off of sales. And her family can't even afford health insurance. J. Marion Sims, father of gynecology. But yet he's a father of gynecology. You consider a medical genius. But what he did, he was torturing black women. He did stuff that made Joseph Goebbels probably blush. What do you think the Nazis learned about eugenics and how to do what they did in Nazi Germany? They learned from America. They learned from the best. So what I'm saying is, like, people say, well, it's like, why you got the Gitmo base? Well, look, why are we consider ourselves American? We're not even citizens, black people. Black is not an ethnic group. Black is not a nationality. It's a color in the crayon box. You keep on trying to tell us that we don't have protection. We're not protected. We're not ownership players. Donald Trump is first generation American. Daddy was he's second generation. Daddy was a Klansman. Granddaddy was a pimp. And now he's president. A black person like Joe Kennedy was a gangster. Had a son that became president, attorney general, senator. You know, black folks are not allowed to do what white folks are allowed to do. Franklin Roosevelt, his maternal grandfather, one of the biggest drug dealers in American history, selling opium to the Chinese, the Opium Wars. Warren Delano Jr. That's how he made the family fortune. Like Lucky Luciano said, behind every great wealth, there's a great crime. So, like, it's all about heightening the contradictions, right? When people say vote for the lesser evil, one person raped 20 people, the other person raped 200 people. Regardless of the quantity, they still rapists. So who really the lesser evil? And so when you vote for these people and put them in a position of power and authority over your life, and you complain about inadequate education, racial discrimination in housing, gender discrimination, police brutality, You have no right to complain because you made your voice heard by voting for the devil who will treat you not that bad. But they all devils. Call one Lucifer, call one Satan, still the devil. Think about that, y'all. And Castro also, we know a lot of the black media did a good job talking about how he sent like 80,000 troops to Angola to fight apartheid in South Africa and Angola, which led to Nelson Mandela getting out of jail. It was not just people saying divest from South Africa. You had people taking military action. This little tiny island nation taking this 90 miles away from Miami had the gall, had the balls and guts, had the swinging them big to take on the white supremacy in Africa, the neo-colonials, and won. That's why Raul Castro, his brother, had such a big role in Nelson Mandela's funeral. He was only one of 6 dignitaries to really be allowed to speak to the masses, to the world, about the greatness of Mandela. Him, because his brother had a special kinship with Nelson Mandela. So, people say, is Castro an agent? I say, we all are agents. We all are a product of this system. You can't call another person coon without being a coon yourself, because you know better than the other person, because you're using so-called money with the slave owner and rapist on it that raped and own your people to buy your so-called, peace of mind, to buy your trinkets and shit. So nobody's better than anybody in the system until we overthrow the system. You know better than the other person you call them a coon. You understand? So, I'm trying to wrap it up. This is like a lot on my mind. And I'm going to share some more things later on. But I just want to put that out there because I think that I do have a responsibility, obligation, and people don't understand what it takes to put yourself out there. You can create yourself, you become a target. People throw a lot of negativity, mean-spiritedness, all that stuff. Want to break your spirit, but this is a marathon. I'm running a marathon, so I don't really care about all that at this point. But I do care about people being liberated in their minds, so they'll be liberated in their actions and thoughts, and do not regret being who you are, because you are a powerful people. Lift yourself up, you mighty race, and accomplish what you will, to paraphrase Brother Marcus Garvey. But look up the Cuban Project. That's Operation Mongoose. The operation that was put in place to get rid of Castro, but probably end up getting rid of President JFK. And also look up Operation Northwoods, the false flag stuff. Look at what's happening right now in America. The death of Castro and the rise of Trump. This is some hell of a time we living in, y'all. And I don't think it's the end. I think it's the beginning of something else. And people want that Jesus coming back rapture bailout. It ain't happening. It is what it is. You know what I'm saying? I don't believe it's going to happen. I believe that we're going to have to fight this one out. Because Malcolm said, there's no such thing as a bloodless revolution. The civil rights movement, people still was getting killed. The Cold War, people still was getting killed. Just because you willing to take an ass whoop don't mean that you're a revolutionary. You understand? A lot of us wouldn't be here right now if some of our ancestors didn't fight back. A lot of us wouldn't be here right now if some of our ancestors didn't fight back. And life is interesting. I had at a store, customer service rep. She said, well, sir, this is going to take about 30 or 40 minutes, dude. Do you have that type of time? I said, I have time, because all we doing is waiting to die. Life is all about waiting to die. But while you waiting to die, do some shit. Don't be afraid, because we all got to go. So, look up Fidel Castro. They don't take nobody's word for it, because they had me believing for years that Fidel Castro tried out as a pitcher for the Washington Senators, and some sources say the New York Yankees. But these were all lies fabricated by the white stream media. This is fake news. And this is why it's so important to get this black media out here right now that has a different point of view. Because you got the white stream press, you got all these people, the Hollywood movies, got y'all thinking that this is the actual facts of what went down. Y'all look at the movie Malcolm X by Spike Lee. Y'all actually think that Mr. Banks was a real person when the truth was it was Malcolm's family that brought him to the Nation of Islam. Malcolm's father is from Georgia. Elijah Poole, a.k.a. Elijah Muhammad, is from Georgia. Family connection, y'all. Family connection. Just like President Obama connected to all the presidents. You know, he related to Cheney and Bush, Lyndon B. Johnson, Harry Truman, even Brad Pitt. You got John D. Rockefeller related to dang Jesse James. You got Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton related. This is blood sport, baby. Blood sport. Recognize what's going on. And keep your head in the game of eyes and prize. Like, you know, people say, another thing, was Castro an agent? Or, like I said, we all agents of something. A lot of us don't even know we're being agents, all right? We're being pawns. Think you playing nothing but pawns. Think you in a field, you just in an arena, sitting in a seat, in the crowd, not doing anything, just spectating and speculating. Like I said, conspiracies and conspiracies. That's all it is. All right, family. I think I covered as much as I could in my ramblings and musings for this Fidel Castro thing. If you like what you heard, please share the word. Please point people to our YouTube channel to subscribe. Please do it that way, y'all, family. Just do it. Support our channel, We All Be TV. Because a lot of times people will take the stuff and they'll re-upload it and claim it as their own, and they're not doing the work. And I want to encourage everybody, put your point of view out there, because like I'm willing to travel thousands of miles. Like I do this work. I'm traveling on the road, thousands of miles, trying to get the information. I could just be selfish and keep it for myself, but I know that knowledge is the currency of the universe, and that information is power. Bad information is bad power. Good information is good power. What Dick Gregory always said. But it's only powerful if you apply it to what you want. So remember that, boys and girls, scholars and laymen. This is your friend, Brother Ron, a.k.a. R2C2A, the artivist. And I'm out, but I'm never down. Peace. Love. We love you madly. Keep producing and pushing.